Welcome to War Bios, the podcast that delves into the complexities of military history's most pivotal conflicts. I'm your host, General Biography, and today we're going to explore the earliest history of the Battle of Petersburg, a crucial turning point in the American Civil War. As we set the stage for this epic struggle, let's begin by understanding the strategic importance of Petersburg, Virginia. Located at the confluence of the Appomattox and James Rivers, Petersburg was a vital transportation hub, with 5 railroads converging on the city. Its proximity to Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy, made it a crucial prize for both the Union and Confederate armies. In the spring of 1864, Union forces under the command of General Ulysses S. Grant were determined to capture Richmond and bring an end to the war. However, the Confederate Army, led by General Robert E. Lee, was equally determined to defend their capital at all costs. As Grant's army advanced towards Richmond, they encountered a series of defensive lines constructed by the Confederates, including the Dimmock Line, a 10-mile-long earthen trench system built in 1862. On June 9, 1864, Union forces under the command of General Benjamin Butler launched a surprise attack on the Dimmock Line, hoping to capture Petersburg before Lee's army could arrive. The attack was repelled with heavy losses, and Butler's troops were forced to regroup and reassess their strategy. This initial failure would set the tone for the rest of the campaign, as both sides became mired in a grueling siege that would last for months. As we explore the earliest history of the Battle of Petersburg, it becomes clear that this conflict was not just a series of military engagements, but a complex interplay of strategic decisions, logistical challenges, and technological innovations. The city's defenders, led by General P.G.T. Beauregard, would employ novel tactics such as digging extensive trench networks and using landmines to repel Union attacks. The Confederates also made use of the local terrain, utilizing the numerous waterways and swamps that surrounded Petersburg to their advantage. They constructed a series of fortified bridges and pontoon crossings, allowing them to move troops and supplies quickly and efficiently across the Appomattox River. These defensive measures would prove crucial in the early stages of the siege, as the Union Army struggled to gain a foothold around the city. As the Union Army approached Petersburg, they encountered not only the Dimmock Line, but also a series of other defensive fortifications, including Fort Clifton and Fort Drury's Bluff. These forts were strategically located to control access to the Appomattox River and prevent Union gunboats from advancing up the river. In the weeks leading up to the siege, both sides engaged in a series of skirmishes and probing attacks as they jockeyed for position and tried to gain an advantage. The Confederates, however, were able to maintain their defensive lines, and the Union Army was forced to regroup and prepare for a long and bloody campaign. As we've seen in this introductory segment, the Battle of Petersburg was shaped by a combination of geographical, technological, and strategic factors. The city's unique location, with its access to the Appomattox River and the surrounding rail network, made it a critical prize for both sides. The Confederates were determined to hold on to Petersburg at all costs, while the Union Army saw it as a key stepping stone towards capturing Richmond and ultimately winning the war. As the summer of 1864 wore on, the Union Army, under the command of General Ulysses S. Grant, continued to press its advantage, seeking to break through the Confederate defenses and capture Petersburg. One of the most significant events during this period was the Battle of the Crater, which took place on July 30, 1864. In a bold and innovative tactic, Union engineers dug a tunnel under the Confederate lines and detonated a massive explosion, creating a crater that was intended to be a breach in the enemy's defenses. The explosion was massive, killing hundreds of Confederate soldiers and creating a gaping hole in their lines. However, the Union Army's follow-up attack was poorly planned and executed, and they were ultimately unable to capitalize on the initial shock of the explosion. The Confederates quickly regrouped and launched a counterattack, driving the Union troops back and inflicting heavy casualties. Despite this setback, the Union Army continued to apply pressure on the Confederate defenses, launching a series of attacks and probes along the entire front line. One notable example was the Battle of Globe Tavern, which took place in August 1864. In this engagement, Union forces under the command of General Gouverneur Warren launched a surprise attack on the Confederate lines, seeking to cut the Weldon Railroad. a vital supply line that connected Petersburg to the rest of the Confederacy. The battle was fierce and intense, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. However, in the end, the Union Army emerged victorious, having successfully cut the railroad and dealt a significant blow to the Confederate war effort. This victory marked a turning point in the campaign, as the Confederates were increasingly forced to rely on alternative supply lines, which were more vulnerable to disruption. As we explore this critical period in the Battle of Petersburg, it becomes clear that the siege was not just a series of military engagements, but a complex interplay of strategic decisions, logistical challenges, and technological innovations. The Union Army's use of trench warfare, mining, and other tactics marked a significant shift in the way that wars were fought, and the Confederates were forced to adapt and innovate in response. One notable example of this innovation was the use of chevaux de frise, a type of defensive obstacle consisting of wooden stakes or metal spikes embedded in the ground. These obstacles were designed to slow down or repel advancing troops, and they played a significant role in the Confederate defenses around Petersburg. As we examine the Battle of Petersburg in all its complexity, it's clear that this conflict was a testing ground for new tactics and technologies, many of which would go on to influence the course of military history. The siege also marked a significant turning point in the war, as the Confederacy's ability to resist the Union Army began to wane. As the winter of 1864–1865 wore on, the Confederate defenses around Petersburg began to weaken, due in part to the Union Army's continued pressure and the dwindling supply lines. In March 1865, General Ulysses S. Grant launched a series of attacks on the Confederate lines, seeking to break through and capture the city. The final battle took place on April 2, 1865, when Union forces under the command of General Horatio Wright broke through the Confederate lines at Fort Fisher, marking a decisive turning point in the campaign. The fall of Petersburg was soon followed by the fall of Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy, which was evacuated on April 3, 1865. As the Confederacy crumbled, General Robert E. Lee's army retreated westward, pursued by the Union Army. On April 9, 1865, Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, marking the effective end of the American Civil War. The siege of Petersburg had a profound impact on the course of the war and the nation as a whole. The battle marked a significant turning point in the conflict, as the Confederacy's ability to resist the Union Army began to wane. The siege also marked a shift in the way that wars were fought, with the use of trench warfare, mining, and other tactics becoming more prevalent. In the aftermath of the war, Petersburg was left devastated, with many buildings destroyed or damaged during the siege. The city's population had also been significantly reduced due to the displacement of civilians and the loss of life during the conflict. However, as the nation began to rebuild and heal, Petersburg played an important role in the Reconstruction era, serving as a hub for freed slaves and a center for education and economic development. Today, the legacy of the Battle of Petersburg can still be seen in the city's historic sites and landmarks, including the Petersburg National Battlefield, which commemorates the siege and its significance in American history. The battle also serves as a reminder of the ongoing struggle for freedom and equality that continues to shape our nation today. The siege was a testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit, as soldiers on both sides endured unimaginable hardship and sacrifice in pursuit of their goals. That's all for today's War Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, I'm General Biography reminding you to keep marching toward victory.